Hi, I'm Tyrone. Like your shoelaces, you tie your own. Today, one of the staples of a good barbecue. No, not sausages. We've got pulled pork. Cooking up a Boston butt. Apparently, that name comes from transporting pig shoulders in repurposed wooden alcohol casks, or butts. I just like the name butt. So I've bought the whole shoulder of a pig. My butcher has cut it in half and deboned one side, and I'm going to have a crack at the other half. My butcher took about 3 minutes to get these bones out, and he gave me the bones so that I could see what they look like. As you can see here, this is not sped up, and I'm actually doing this in real time. Much quicker and much more jumpy than my butcher actually did. The butt is the chunk of meat closer to the shoulder that doesn't include the leg at the bottom. You don't need to take out the blade bone. In fact, it can be a good indicator of doneness. When you take out the bones, keep them and make a stock with them. More on that a little bit later. Also, typically when you make a pulled pork, take the skin off first, trim the fat off because there's enough intermuscular fat, and trim out any of the connective tissue, all of the veins and all of the tendons. It's a lot better to pull it out now. I don't know why, but just do it, yo. Then, marinade. Sprinkle a bunch of spices over the top. I'm using salt, pepper, ginger, nutmeg, dill, paprika, chives, garlic, fennel, brown sugar, and a very little amount of cayenne pepper. It's fairly self-explanatory what you can see happening here. I'm covering it in those spices just slowly. Pork doesn't have a huge amount of flavor in and of itself. It needs flavor added to it, and these spices really help. But this isn't a rub. This is the marinade. Well, I mean, it kind of works as a rub. Submerge that bad boy in kombucha and refrigerate overnight. Kombucha is a fruity, sweet, mildly vinegary beverage that's super easy to make. Brew some strong black tea. Typically it's just boring black tea. I prefer to make it with a fruity black tea. My local market has a pretty amazing blackberry tea that I like to use for my kombuchas. Mix that once brewed with some sugar, or in my case I'm using honey and brown sugar. Allow it to cool down and add that to the rest of your kombucha. There's a SCOBY on top. SCOBY stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. The yeast eats the sugar, converts that to alcohol. The bacteria converts the alcohol to vinegar, so more sugar equals a more vinegary taste. As said, kombucha is a fruity, sweet, mildly vinegary beverage. Just like coffee, except instead of vinegary, it's a different kind of bitter. That's been marinating overnight. Take it out of the fridge the next morning, add some more spice. Much of the spice is still there from the night before. See, I said that it wasn't a rub, but it kind of also... I'm using some more salt and pepper again. And just like with beef ribs, I pre-char the wood. The more smoke now, the less in the smoker, and there's really a sweet spot for the amount of smoke. Too much smoke, it will be uncomfortably bitter. It's best smoked over a light fruity wood. I have red gum available, which is neither light nor fruity. Pork, that goes into your smoker. Keep the temperature at over 125 degrees Celsius. I keep it at about 125 degrees. While it's smoking, take your kombucha marinade in a pot, add some apple juice, some apple cider vinegar, and some maple syrup. I've already combined those few things to each other, and boil that down. Reduce it by basically a half. 5 hours later at 125 degrees ish, This is what your pork looks like, and it's time to wrap. You can go for a thicker, more aggressive bark. This is enough to have lightly caramelized the outside, to have made it a light golden brown. If you want to make it a richer, darker, caramelly brown, or even just completely black, leave it another hour or two. When wrapping, double layer of thick alfoil. I'm using about 2 ladle loads or a cup and a half of this marinade. Basically enough to have it sitting in a pool of the marinade less than a centimetre deep. Also, remember those pork bones? Roast them in your smoker for at least half an hour. For at least an hour. Well, I shoot for 2 hours. That'll work. I need that pot the marinade was in. So that's being transferred to something smaller. But then, your smoked pork bones go into that pot. Don't be afraid to break them. Submerge that in water and boil it for like a month. That's the simplest way to make a stock. What does this have to do with pulled pork? Well, I mean, if you've got the bones and you've got the smoker going, you might as well use the space and might as well use it for something. 3 hours later, it's time to pull the butt off the smoker. Put that into a bigger pot. I forgot to hit record. Well, I thought I hit record, but this is the hard part. The hardest part is leaving it now for at least an hour. If you shred it immediately, this is going to be a dry waste of leathery time. Of crumbly time. It will have the same texture as a hard, stringy cheese, which I've never had a hard, stringy cheese, but I imagine it to be like a dry pulled pork. You can see how much steam is coming off after this hour of letting it sit. If you do it immediately, if you shred it immediately, then all of that steam will disappear and it will just have no moisture. I have these fully sick claw-shaped thingos. They were given to me as a birthday present, so it's worth using them now, even though they're entirely unnecessary. This is one tender daddy. I could just use tongs and pull it apart. Add that sauce you've been marinating it in. If you've done it right, the sauce isn't to give it juiciness, but instead a little bit more flavour. Make sure you have a taste while you're shredding it. Then take it to where you need to get it. I'm using this not as pet food per se, but I am using it to attract some of the local birds. Come on. Yeah, mate. Have a crack. Oi, nah. What are you're spilling it everywhere. Yeah, no, you go. I'll follow. See, I said I'd follow. Right, leftovers. Ziploc bags with some of that sauce into the freezer. I did actually give a lot of the pork away to people. I didn't just have that one little piece for the kookaburra. Leftovers into Ziploc bags with some of that sauce and into a freezer. When you want to reheat it, don't microwave it. These are Ziploc bags, they'll melt. Also, it does bad things for the pulled pork. Instead, if you've got the option to sous vide it, do it. I did it for about 45 minutes at 65 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a sous vide, drop it in a pot of water that has just boiled and don't leave it boiling. But do leave it in that hot water for a while. Oh yeah, now that it's been like a month of simmering, remember that stock that you were making? Get rid of the bones. Put that in little containers and use it in a later cook for something fun and porky and fun. Like a pea and ham soup or maybe a lasagna. Also, colour is flavour. Now what? Like, subscribe and share? Except imagine I said that with confidence. Yeah.